I can flip 3 houses a year and make $100,000 a year,
Right.
plus buy a few more and keep them as rentals, and eventually
Yep.
like have a pretty nice little portfolio and not have to work at all. And so it was the quickest way for me to get to a point where I could mountain bike more and I can go snow skiing more and not have to worry about money.
Let's jam, man. We got some topics to cover. I enjoyed our first little chat in the green room
Sure.
when we did our pre-show call, but here we're going to talk mostly about you. Probably salt in me just a little bit because my ego won't let me go without it. So you know how that goes. Probably try to throw myself and throw my weight around there a little bit while we're going forward. But really, we want to talk about you, and we want to talk about investing, business mindset. We want to talk about the stuff you and I talk about, how to get involved in ways to pay more taxes. That's what we're here for today, right? Pay more taxes.
Yeah, or the anti of paying more taxes.
Or maybe we can learn some ways to not pay taxes. Maybe that's a cool topic for today. Obviously, extremely relevant too for what's occurring in our world, as yesterday will probably be known as some version of Bloody Blood Monday. I don't know what they're calling it now, but have you been paying much attention to the world of stocks? And
I do not look at the stock market hardly ever. What I do pay attention to is what the Fed's doing and what banks are doing, and I hear about the Signature and Silvergate and SVP. I actually know he's not really anymore because it's liquidated, but I know the owner or the majority owner of Silvergate. And at one point he had made a 37x return on his money, but now it's a 0. You know what? Fascinating thing, it hasn't ever gone to 0. Real estate.
Yeah, isn't that fascinating? Assets backed of some kind that are not transitory in nature or have a fiat aspect to them, right? Isn't that fascinating? Right. It's all still funny money to some degree, isn't it? I mean, even if we're playing with the aspect of it.
That's true. That's true. But yeah, the last time I had money in the stock market, every time I put money in the stock market, I always ended up being 0. And I was one of those guys that couldn't handle the emotional volatility or the volatility. It would create a tremendous amount of emotion. So like I was always like looking at my phone, like in meetings, and I'm like, this is not for me.
Out.
I have to stick my money in a building and not be able to get it out until I work really hard to increase rents and then get out. So.
Well, it almost sounds like a 401k. Isn't that how we work it? Like for 30 years and then you get access to your money after 30 years, but only if you get access to the way they want you to get access to it.
Right. Well, yeah, with real estate, you can sell those. So it's not like 401ks make really good sense for people who have jobs and they get 50% matched. All of a sudden the return is actually like 50, 60% a year. But then you can't touch it until you're almost dead. And that's
always think of MC Hammer. Can't touch this. Every time I think of 401ks. Of course, today they're probably more like going to be 301ks if it keeps going, than maybe a 201k for those who are not paying attention to the stock market, which I don't really much either. I mean, it's too volatile. Like you said, I have nothing in it. I'm a wealth without Wall Street advocate. I think about money in different ways and investing in business and assets and physical products. And we have our own real estate and stuff as well. So I'm in line with you. But how did you come to that thinking in getting into real estate? Was your dad a biggie real estate broker? I looked to ask people, were you a trust fund baby?
Yeah, definitely not trust fund baby. I started with $2,500 when I bought my first house. But before that, I was in college. I fell in love with a girl who's now my wife. And I'm like, I got to figure this out. And I was like, man, it seems like in order for my kids to be prepared for college, to have enough money to not borrow loans, that sort of thing, I have to put $500 a month away for kids. And if we want to have 4 kids, that's freaking $2,000 a month. Well, most of the jobs I'm being offered are $42,000 plus maybe a bonus. I'm like, that's gonna be really hard. And then it was like, then I gotta like save for my retirement in 401ks and Roth. I'm like, that's another 5 to 1,000. But like, I'm like literally giving all my money away to either the government or some form of the government through like investing in 529s and 401ks. And I was like, surely there's a different way. And then my boss actually handed me a book called Rich Dad Poor Dad, which is pretty much every real estate investor's favorite book to ever read.
Yes,
and they always mention it every time they do a stupid podcast. Oh, that's my favorite book. That's a great book. There's plenty of other books that are also really good. There's a lot
of other ones. Yeah, the other ones are good. It's the 4-quadrant process is the only one.
Yeah, the 4-quadrant. I think that's an incredible like tool to educate an entire generation on how to actually make money and generate wealth. But yeah, basically what happened is I had that revelation. I'm like, I got to find something else. I didn't have any cash, so needed to have a lot of money to buy real estate. And then 2008 happened. Real estate got really cheap. Banks wanted to finance it, and I learned that actually having a network of being able to get into certain banks was how I was able to buy all the houses I bought. So knowing a couple of people in my town that had really big real estate portfolios, me going, hey, like, can you connect me with your banker? Like that helped me go from from not owning anything to buying over 400 houses in a 5-year span, starting with $2,500. And so That's essentially how it started. Definitely my dad, going back to the trust fund comment, my dad invested, I think, in my first house and gave him a good return back. And I'm like, he's a great dude, real hard worker. I learned a lot from him. Definitely not trust fund giving or whatever that means.
Oh, no, I mean, clearly it's not, we're not, most of the people I interview are not. We're all sort of scrappers in some degree, obviously, but you had to make the decision to get that 2,500 in risk, and your dad had to trust the situation enough to put the money into it at all, because some family members would be like, hey, I'm not, whatever, I saw you grow up, I changed your diapers, hell no, I'm not giving you any money. And then there are the others who are like, okay, well, you're sort of put together. I guess he kind of felt you were worth the risk, which is amazing to get that start. And that's very cool. But obviously you did something with it from that point forward. And why real estate? You read the book, but why'd you follow it?
Well, a lot of it was because I didn't have any, I'm like, man, there is zero other, as far as I could tell, there was zero other ways to get wealthy and to have a really nice lifestyle in this country other than owning businesses or owning real estate. I chose real estate because you really, for the most part, it's kind of a lazy man's game. Rent's due on the 1st, it's late on the 5th. If I get my rent, I don't really have to work except for maintenance issues, that sort of thing, until the next time. That's an incredibly oversimplified way of communicating. But with businesses, I had a friend, I interviewed a guy that owned like 10 Subways, and he would like break it down. I'm like, damn, that's a lot of work to make $100,000 a year. I'm like, I can flip 3 houses a year and make $100,000 a year. Plus buy a few more and keep them as rentals, and eventually like have a pretty nice little portfolio and not have to work at all. And so it was the quickest way for me to get to a point where I could mountain bike more and I can go snow skiing more and not have to worry about money, basically. So really it was
personal purpose-driven goals. You just knew that if you did that, then the outcome would be obviously skiing, hanging out with your wife, and dealing with termites, tenants, and toilets. There's positive and negatives to every aspect, but they do say, and I think it's statistically proven, that the wealthiest people in America own real estate for a reason, as an asset-driven reason. But what are the other reasons why people who might have capital in other locations or who aren't really into real estate at this point, would they get into it right now? If they did, how would they get into it? Where's the best place to start? What are you seeing from your position?
So the best place to start, especially if you were, let's say, an attorney or a doctor or a business owner, but do not have the time to learn another skill set. The best way would be to invest in guys like me who syndicate deals, whether it's me or one of my buddies, finding people who have investment offerings. You can invest passively for $100,000. It's locked up for 4 or 5 years, and then you get $200,000 back, and then you put it again back in the same with the same guy. Sometimes those 2x end up being 3x returns, that sort of thing. A lot of times you get your money back through refinance way before that 5-year benchmark, and also you still have the ownership, and then you can put that cash flow you got into another deal. So it can really compound. That's the best way to do it from a passive standpoint. In addition, like I have a couple of people I know, he works as he's a trust officer at a bank, and she's a surgeon, very successful surgeon, $500,000-$600,000 a year. He makes about 120. If you can imagine, those are 2 W-2 jobs. That's a lot of taxes. So just 35-40% of their income is taxes. And I was like, man, what you need to do is quit your job, because you don't really need that money, and then learn how to buy real estate. And then you guys file jointly. And when you file jointly, you the guy that does all the real estate would be considered a real estate professional according to his taxes. And that means all the depreciation on your buildings actually wash down to your ordinary income, including your wife's ordinary income. And so your effective tax bracket, instead of being 40%, goes down to like 15%. So you end up saving a lot more money. But if you really think if you break that down, you're essentially working 5 months for the government and 7 months for yourself. And then if you're putting it if you're putting it in traditional investment vehicles, you're working another 3 months for your future self. So really, you're making very little money.
That's a really interesting way to put that time to perspective. I'm going to draw that out because I've never heard anybody quite describe it like that. We always say trading time for money, and we always talk about how to overcome the time advantage or disadvantage, depending upon how you look at it, because we can only sleep so long, and then we have the rest of the day, and so on and so forth. But I like the way you broke that down to how many months we pay Uncle Sam, because if people will actually realize in the way they structure assets or income, and the way they're not writing off taxes or trying to depreciate by protecting themselves as businesses or in other ways of doing this, that they are literally you should be thinking about it in terms of how many months I'm paying Uncle Sam. I had never thought about it. Who taught you that? Was that something you came up with, or is that?
I'm sure someone told me, but it's something I think about a lot.
Genius.
So
It makes sense because if you stop and you go, crap, I'm paying for like 7 months out of the year, 6 months out of the year, I'm paying for Uncle Sam. Like half my year is gone to just taxes. If that doesn't shake and rattle your brain right now, then you're not paying attention.
Yeah, depending on where you live geographically, you could actually be paying more than that. And so just
don't freak them out too much, man. I had them at 6 months. If you're going to tell them 8 months, people are going to panic if they hear that. We're going to have an SVB style.
Well, I remember Phil Mickelson, the golfer,
me,
was complaining about his income and how much taxes he pays, and like it was calculated, it was like 82% collectively when you take everything in. So like he makes like 200 million. Which still $40 million is still a lot of money. But when you're making that much money and all of it goes away, that's got to be painful. And everyone was giving him shit because he was complaining about it. I'm like, I would have been complaining about it too. So it's just a lot of money.
Well, there's all the other stacks. Like, so we're just talking about, if we talk about IRS, that's one. Of course, you got state tax, of course. And then at the local level and license level and any other license level, you're going to be paying additional taxes on top of all that. So you may not actually know what your true annualized tax rate is unless you sat down and went through all those taxes. Probably freak most people out. Most Americans probably don't even understand how much we pay in taxes or how much.
If you start in January and it's not until April you start actually making money for yourself. That's a
bit of a downer.
That's 3 months.
So where's the upside on that, right? Not paying more taxes. So real estate, how do we do that? So let's go through that scenario. If I syndicate with you and I want something in the 50 to 100K range investment, I should expect roughly what you said, 3 to 4, maybe 5 years to doubling my money.
Yeah, so our deals are typically 5 to 7 year projects.
Okay.
We've definitely gotten through with them in like 2 months. But I typically say your cash is going to be held up for about 5 to 7 months because like right now, nothing's selling. It's not an advantageous time to sell or refinance because we're going to take a 5% loan and make it even higher principal because we're trying to do a cash out, get everybody's cash back, and now we're paying 8% or 9%, and so. Yeah, 5 to 7 year projects. We'll have an exit somewhere in year 5, year 7 which is what I meant by that. Generally speaking, what we do is the first year we do what's called a cost segregation study. We only do large commercial buildings. Right now, we're only doing self-storage facilities. So on a self-storage facility, we hire a consultant to go and like calculate all the metal and calculate all the trim and all the concrete and all the anything else. If we have an office, they go in and measure the crown molding. They go and measure the plumbing. All that. And then they put that into like a pretty high end or complicated like calculator. And then that pushes out what the 27 or the 39 year depreciation, the 27 year depreciation, the 15 and 5 year depreciable asset basis are. And because of the Jobs Act, which is slowly running out, but right now the Jobs Act will allow you to take that number and fully depreciate up to 80% of it as of 2023. In 2022 is 100. It's 80 now, in 23 it'll be 60, and 24 so on, unless we get a new
different situation,
a different president or something like that. And so different situation up there in Washington. And so because of that, like your 100K, literally you could be cutting at like $45,000-$50,000 the first year in depreciation. And so so that goes, so the thing is on these projects, the first and second year you typically don't have a gain. We'll get you a little bit of cash flow and that sort of thing. It's when we refinance and when we sell, you get all the gain. But if you have other projects and other Schedule C items, that's when that depreciation really, the depreciation from our projects really start helping you out on a taxable basis.
So where are you syndicating those deals? Into what particular kinds of assets? Is it multi-tenant? Is it single family?
Yeah, right now it's self-storage. That's the only thing we feel confident in. We feel like most other asset classes are overvalued, overpriced, over risky. I'm not buying an office complex anytime soon. I'm not gonna buy a triple net retail center anytime soon. Those are just so expensive right now, and you just really can't reach yield. But with storage, the great thing about storage is it's different than all the other asset classes in the sense that you have month-to-month leases, and then you typically have 300 to 400 tenants on one project or one facility, as opposed to one tenant or 10 tenants or 100 tenants. So when you have 400 tenants paying less than $200 a month in rent, generally speaking, you have a lot less default and you have a lot less risk, because you could lose 40 tenants, you still have 360 tenants paying. And then given that it's a month-to-month only or month-to-month lease, if the market shifts and there's a lot of demand, you can raise rents quite a bit. If market saturates, then you can lower rents a little bit to make sure you maintain that occupancy. Another reason we like storage is because, like I said a minute ago, it's just concrete and metal. It's very easy to run, very low operating expenses, very low maintenance. Most of real estate maintenance will kill your yield or kill your return on investment. With storage, it's very challenging to have a high maintenance budget on that because it's just, there's nothing to fix. Those doors are made of industrial strength steel and they tend to last. So
now, do you build or buy predominantly in that investment strategy, or both? And if both, or which one are you seeing? Yeah, okay. So which one are you kind of seeing?
So we want to build 1 to 2 a year. It's a lot of effort, especially where the demand is right now, or more of the major metropolitan areas. They're overrun right now with development, planning, and zoning departments. Their planning and zoning departments are completely overrun because there's so much development going on. We want to build because building, you can build for 9, you can build to it for 11 cap, basically a 9% return or 11% cap. Whereas buying, you're buying at a 5.8 or a 6.5 cap typically. However, so we'll do 2 builds. We'll build those up and we'll sell those to like Extra Space or another publicly traded REIT. And then on the existing stuff, we want to buy those because that's where that depreciation comes from. We can do the cost seg. You already have an asset, you have a cash flowing asset. So you have income coming in from day one and you have a depreciable basis you have a basis you can depreciate from day one. And so that really cuts down our taxes and our limited partners taxes.
That's fantastic, man. So where in terms of your portfolio are you at right now?
Yeah, primarily Texas. We got some stuff in Oklahoma City. We really like Oklahoma City. It's a real boring market. And I like boring stuff because it's just safe. And then, so we got a big RV and boat storage facility in Edmond, Oklahoma, which is outside of OKC. And then Sunbelt states is where we're looking to buy. And then we own a good amount in Texas. We're about to build one in Austin. That one's taken over 2 years to get permitted. The market's changed quite a bit in 2 years, if you can imagine that. So, that stuff we build is all in major metropolitan areas. And then the stuff we want to buy is typically in tertiary or secondary markets.
Very good, man. Any other thoughts you want to leave me with here before we go?
No, I feel like we covered everything.
Yeah, dude, you were rocking it. Hopefully everybody caught up on all that. If you have any information or want to get in touch with Travis, where do we go? Do we look you up on social media? Do you have a website you want to pop in real quick?
The best website is investwithtravis.com. That's if you're wanting to invest passively. And then if you're wanting to partner on future deals with me, you can go to housetoempire.com. It's basically teaching people my journey from buying houses to getting over to the commercial real estate sector.
Very cool. It's like Subscribe and Safe to some degree. It's like you build yourself a subscription business out of locker storage units.
Oh yeah, dude, I say that a lot. I'm like, it's just like a gym membership. Like people, they get it and then they forget about it, and it's such a small amount that they're like, oh man, I guess I could take that crap out, but I got something else to do today. You know,
it's a Planet Fitness model, because if you listen to them, right, they're like $10 a month. 60+% of the people don't even show up every month. They keep paying $10 a month, and then they license the equipment back to themselves, so they don't even own the equipment in the facilities. And most people don't show up, so they just have this amazing subscription model that's only used by 20% of their business in any location that they sign up, and they'll sign up an average of something like 200 to 1 million people in those different locations based on cities. And I'm like, oh, that's insane. That's an incredible business model, a $10 a month business model.
That is incredible. That is incredible.
People don't want to undo, but I could see where we're very attached to our stuff. Like the joke from George Carlin was, only in America will you have $80,000 worth of cars in the driveway and $5,000 worth of junk inside your garage.
In the garage.
I mean, that's exactly how America is, right?
A lot of
an interesting business model, right? You should take George Carlin into your marketing. You might be able to get some people to hook into that.
That's fascinating.
Travis, appreciate you coming on, brother. Thanks for your time.
Yeah, thanks, Neil. Take care, man.